Zombie Apocalypse.
What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another video. This is 6 Scale Economist, where we review hot toys and what our opinions on them, as well as their implications on how we think they're going to perform in the secondary market. In today's video, this one I've been very excited for, and one that has been requested now a couple of times on the channel, is Star Wars Hot Toys Clone Wars Captain Rex 1/6 scale figure. So just jumping right into it, let's just take a look at some of these images. And let me just preface this by saying this is probably, I can probably say that this is the single most anticipated hot toy that Star Wars hot toy that Hot Toys has released so far. And that's just based off of what I've seen from the feedback in all the different Facebook groups that, most of us are in, as well as my own personal interest in this figure. I mean, this figure is awesome. I mean, it really did break the internet when this figure was announced. So this figure was teased on May the 4th. I woke up that morning on May the 4th, and I checked Facebook as I usually do just to see if there's any announcements, and they announced the 40th anniversary Boba Fett in Kenner packaging and the 40th anniversary Darth Vader, but they also teased this figure. And I think that the way they teased it was they just covered the head sculpt, and everybody's thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, now this was such a big deal because Hot Toys got the license for Clone Wars, which was long held by Sideshow, because as we know, Sideshow used to make Clone Wars figures. So there was a lot of speculation on whether or not Hot Toys is going to be able to do this and make this leap and take an animated show and make figures. And this was just, I mean, I just can't say enough good things about how great this release was, this announcement was, for this figure, and like for what the potential is for this line. So just taking a look at this figure, I mean, I usually have like positive and negatives to say about a lot of these figures. I actually have literally zero negatives to say about this figure. I know some people have been talking about like, oh, they could have done like an animated head sculpt, or like, oh, the visor, the helmet looks like a bit off. Like, there's just none of that resonates with me. This figure just hit the nail on the head. Like, I mean, the armor looks great. The accessories are awesome. I mean, you get the detailing, the carbon scoring on the armor is just fantastic. Like a magnetic jetpack, like, and actually, I'm not going to mention anything on the show for anybody that hasn't finished the show. But just like having this jetpack is just, it's just such a great look. Even the fire effects, like, I think they look great. Like, you get the two pistols, Captain Rex signature pistols. You also are able to like put this visor down, which is something that normally is like a thing with just Commander Bly, but they even took the extra step to include that. They also included this extra accessory, for this kind of like light bulb thing, which is just another small detail that like Hot Toys is just so known for, just like always hitting these small details on the head. The face sculpt is just immaculate, and I know that some people are going to say like, oh, this is just Hot Toys like being smart with their money. Like, they basically took like the Commander Cody head sculpt and changed the hair and changed the look a little bit, but that just doesn't bother me one bit. I personally, I actually didn't want to see this figure be animated, just because it's no other Star Wars Hot Toys are animated. So like, when this figure is a realistic style, it's just going to fit so much better with the collection. And either way, I, along with what sounds like a lot of people, are not going to display this figure with its helmet off anyways, so it's not really a big deal to me. But even if I was going to, I would still prefer the realistic head sculpt as opposed to an animated one. And you get this Ahsoka Tano themed helmet, which is just such a cool added bonus that we didn't even expect. Like, just this pose here, like, I probably am gonna, like, for a large majority of the time, probably pose him like potentially in this pose. Like, this is just such a cool shot, like so like metaphoric, and it's just such a great pose, and so awesome that we get that accessory. I mean, everything about this figure is just immaculate. I mean, we sure as heck waited very long for this figure, but Hot Toys, when they came, they're gonna come and they're gonna do it once and they're gonna do it right, and they just absolutely knocked this one out of the park. So just like taking a look here at like some of the accessories that he comes with, we obviously just get him in his normal armor. Like if you notice, like the cloth that the material that they're using on the armor is such that it's going to be a very posable figure, which is great. And just knowing Hot Toys, I assume they're not going to make the same like very poor mistake that Sideshow did with their figures, which is, for anybody that has any of the Sideshow clones, the armor is like very loose on these figures, and it's like actually like really like a fault in how they made them. And I think is like somewhat of a major con of the figures, is like the armor is very loose and it just makes the figure feel like a lot more cheap. I just imagine that's something that, just like given what we've seen from Hot Toys, it's just not something mistake that they're going to make with this figure. But obviously you get all the awesome hand gestures that you can mix and match. Like I mentioned before, you get like the visor that Commander Bly has, and you get this extra little light bulb, and you get the magnetic jetpack with the fire effects, standard display stand, this awesome Ahsoka Tano head sculpt. Awesome Ahsoka Tano helmet with this head sculpt. Like, can't say enough good things about this figure. And then just like taking a look at this picture from Secret Base, I know it's just one picture, but just like being able to like see the figure, and you're gonna get the dynamic like flight stand, so you can get them even like more awesome poses. Like, needless to say, I think I've made my point clear on this figure from a figure perspective. I mean, this is like the one that like I know I've been waiting for, and from what it sounds like, a lot of people have been waiting for. Like, this is what we've all been asking for Hot Toys. And like me personally, I originally started collecting Star Wars. I started collecting the vintage collection, and like anybody who's collected the vintage collection, which is produced by Hasbro, like you can tell Hasbro like 100 million times what the fans want and what they want to see, and like telling Hasbro like, make this and we will give you our money for it, and they just like a lot of the time they just won't do it with the vintage collection figures. And it's so refreshing to move over to Hot Toys. And Hot Toys obviously has like some similar issues with that, because they are like a large company with a lot of demand. But like everybody was asking for this figure. Like, get the Clone Wars license and make a Clone Wars Rex. And then they just did it, and they just nailed it. Okay, so that's the figure from a figure standpoint. Now let's talk about it from an investment standpoint. So just looking at it at face value, it appears to be an obvious choice of something to just buy because it's going to go up. Now, while I will say that there is actually a lot of merit to that argument, I think that there is a little bit of downside that maybe people aren't necessarily pricing in that is important to recognize. But first, let's look at the upside of this figure. So originally, Sideshow had the license for Clone Wars, and so they made the Sideshow, like I think they called them Heroes of War, Militaries of War. It was a couple of different lines, but essentially they made Captain Rex. So they made the Phase 1 Captain Rex, and they made the Phase 2 Captain Rex. And both of them were like pretty good. The Phase 1 Captain Rex, like I think it actually like rose like pretty well in value, and actually held its own once this Phase 2 was announced, because like obviously a Phase 1 wasn't announced. And now that one is probably, for a while it was trading around, selling around $300, and it probably peaked up to like 600 people were able to sell it for, and now it's kind of settled back to about $350. But the Phase 2 Captain Rex, for anyone that is familiar with the market of this figure, was unbelievable. Just taking a look here, here's some of the sold listings, but let's go back to before this was announced. So this was, for a while leading up to this announcement, like this was the norm. Like this was not crazy. Like this figure sold on April 23rd. Like, keep in mind, this figure, the Hot Toys version, was announced on May the 4th. This figure selling for over $1,000 was not even a surprise to a lot of people. And like some, there were some like listings like this one, like 800, like pre-owned, like like. I'm not even sure if that one like comes with the box or anything, like $739, $720, but like this figure probably fluctuated, and this picture had a lot of volatility. This figure probably fluctuated anywhere from $550 if you're getting a good deal, up to like people like paying like $1,200, $1,300 for this figure. we've also seen a similar thing with Fives and Echo, which were also Sideshow Phase 2 clones, and they still haven't really come down in price, which I think is a huge risk. And I think that anybody that is looking to pick those up, I think you definitely just wait, because you are going to be in for a serious market correction when / if Hot Toys announces that they're doing those figures so well. But let's take a look at what this figure was selling for and what it peaked for, and try and get an idea of what we think the Hot Toys version is going to sell for. So, to a lot of people, a lot of people who are looking at this figure, they're probably thinking it's definitely a buy, because the Sideshow one, went all the way up to $1,200, and like Hot Toys made their version, so like the Hot Toys version is like better, like in essentially every aspect. Like it has to just do the same thing. But remember, the supply of this figure, I think, is going to be very high. And from what I've been noticing, there's been a lot of signs on certain other websites that are telling of this. Like obviously he's still available for pre-order on Sideshow. He's going to be available for pre-order for a very long time. Like obviously that's the beauty of the optionality that Sideshow has when they do pre-orders, is that they can keep just taking pre-orders, and just, I assume what they do is they just essentially tell Hot Toys, hey, keep producing more of this figure. We keep getting more pre-orders. That's why they give such far dates out in advance. But what's interesting about this figure is, when I saw it release, I thought, okay, great. This is obviously an automatic buy, both from a collection standpoint and from an investment standpoint. This figure is just going to go up. But the supply of this figure seems to be really high. So one of the things that I do to get a better idea of what the supply side of figures look like is I take a look at a bunch of other websites and I see how they're selling there. So like it was reassuring that Big Bad Toy Store sold out very quickly. I actually was on their website, and I think they sold out in like 3 hours out of their pre-orders. And the reason why Big Bad Toy Store always sells out first is because, as many of you know, they do the $4 flat shipping, which is like very, very attractive, to a lot of people. Whereas like Sideshow charges like an insane price for shipping, but then they do the Sideshow rewards, which is like supposed to like kind of counterbalance it, but like it really doesn't really counterbalance it, because you're only getting 5% of what the figure retails for. 5% of, $255 is about like $13, but you are going to be paying $24 most likely in shipping, so it doesn't really work. So you find that like a lot of other places saw it first, like Big Bad Toy Store. But what's interesting is there's a couple of other smaller online stores that still have their figures available for pre-order, and a lot of these stores do discounted from retail. So like if it's on Sideshow for $255, these places will do like $245 retail, and like maybe some type of reward system as well, and like cheaper shipping than Sideshow. So usually you see those sites like immediately sell out on very like low supplied figures, because people go and they want to like save like $10 or $15 or $20 from what they were gonna have to pay on Sideshow. So they'll go pre-order from these stores, but a lot of these shops still have this figure available for pre-order, which means their pre-order allotments, which are obviously infinitely smaller than Sideshow, have not sold out yet, which concerns me that this figure is going to be very oversupplied. Now, with that being said, that's the negative. The positive is, and the upside is, one, obviously you're just getting like an awesome figure that's like always going to be in demand. This is going to be at the top of people's lists, just the same way the Sideshow one was, but to an even more extent, because it is a superior figure in every aspect, in my opinion. Not only that, Hot Toys picked up the Clone Wars license, right? And they obviously came out with the one figure that is probably the most in-demand figure. Some people maybe argue Ahsoka is, but definitely from the clone perspective of Clone Wars, Captain Rex has to be the number one figure that everybody wanted. There's a lot of figures that Hot Toys can make to make a lot of money now that they have this license to make Clone Wars figures. I highly doubt that they are going to re-release Captain Rex anytime soon. I think that what they're likely going to do is they're going to keep pumping out different clones, because it's pretty inexpensive for them to just change the moldings. Like you can probably use keep using like a similar head sculpt. Like I'm sure like the armor isn't going to be like that much different. Like take for example, let me pull up the picture, this picture. these 501st Troopers. Now, obviously, this is computer rendered images, so these aren't actual images of real figures back here. But like, think about how easy this would be for Hot Toys to make. Like, all it basically is, it's the same armor with like a little bit of different paint, basically the same head sculpt, and essentially the same helmet. So they're just going to start pumping out all of these clones, I would imagine. And I would imagine they're probably not going to like just like oversupply the market and like, you know, reduce kind of like the lure of like having these figures. Like you only get like, you know, a couple a year, but they have a lot of options to go through. And so they're not going to have any real reason to re-release or make like another version of Captain Rex or anything like that anytime soon, given how many things they now have on their plate that they've done Clone Wars. And I would imagine that this figure is going to sell very, very well, and Hot Toys is going to understand that, and they are a business, and they are in the, you know, the business of making money, so they're probably going to be making a lot of different ones. I expect that we'll see, you know, Rex, some 501st, you know, and when I say this, take it with a grain of salt. This is obviously just as speculative as anyone else would be. I obviously have no inside information onto what figures Hot Toys make. I'm just looking at it from a simple and consumer's point of view, and trying to look at it from their point of view. They're going to make a lot of clones. I assume they're going to make 501st Legion clones. I assume, you know, like we could see like a Commander Wolf, which would be awesome. Like they could do Fives and Echo, although I'm like a little bit, I'm a little bit more speculative that they're going to do Fives and Echo. I think that they're going to stick with more of like the Season 7 Clone War stuff, because I imagine that's probably also something that like Disney wants them to do. So like I imagine we'll like see Rex, we'll see Commander Jet, we'll see like Jesse, we'll see Echo maybe as he appeared in Season 7, or like you know, maybe like the Bad Batch and all of these like other figures from the Clone Wars. And so and then obviously you have like all the Jedi you can do. Like you can do like Ahsoka, you can do the Clone Wars version of Obi-Wan, or Clone Wars version of Anakin, Clone Wars version of Yoda, Clone Wars version of Mace Windu. And even this is getting like a bit far-fetched, but the point that I'm trying to make is there are so many figures that they have to make in Clone Wars that I don't think there's that much risk of reissue of Captain Rex. And I think that they started it off with what probably is going to be the number one most in-demand figure in the line, arguably next to Ahsoka. So, my recommendation, buy this figure if you want it for your collection. And if you are a Star Wars collector, unless you're like a, you know, an original trilogy only, like, you know, retro, like throwback kind of collector, which I, you know, totally understand. I know like some people are, and obviously, like, you know, in my opinion, those are the best movies. But if you're just like not into Clone Wars, then like, you know, maybe pass on this. But like for the majority of people who collect Star Wars Hot Toys, this is what you have been waiting for, and this is like an excellent culmination of so many different aspects of what you want to see in a Hot Toy. So if you want it for your collection, pick it up. If you're unsure, pick it up, period. Just buy it, because your downside risk is that they just like for some reason, you know, reissue this figure because, you know, it's in demand, or they, you know, they just do something, or they like totally oversupplied this figure, and this figure is just going to remain in stock forever. And this figure, no chance it ever goes below retail, and once it sells out, no way it ever goes below retail. You know, ever. Like this figure is just way too in demand of a figure, and like by the time this figure sells out, and like there's new collectors like coming into the scene who like, you know, are just getting into Star Wars Hot Toys, and they realize like Captain Rex is sold out, you best believe they're going to be, you know, paying whatever they can at the secondary market to get this figure. Because I know that if I was just getting into Star Wars Hot Toys and like this figure was like sold out, like this would be the top figure on my list that I would want to buy. And we've all seen what the Sideshow version did, which was, in my opinion, an inferior version. So while I don't think that this figure will ever go up to the amounts that the Sideshow one was calling for, just because the Sideshow one came out so long ago, so it really took a, you know, while. I think those figures came out like 2011 or 2012, so like, you know, that took a lot of time for those figures to get that high in price. This figure is just such a buy. You basically have no downside. There's no downside risk to this figure. It's only upside, and like you're either going to have a little bit of upside, or you're going to have a lot of upside. This figure is, you know, once it sells out, it's probably going to be anywhere from like a $350 to $400 figure to as much, with every stars aligned, this could easily be like a $600 figure. So if you want it, obviously buy it, and if you're on the fence, still buy it. But that's going to conclude my review for Captain Rex. Easily my most anticipated Star Wars hot toy of the year. Probably my most anticipated Star Wars hot toy that they have made. The Mandalorian, the Child Deluxe set is up there. Commander Cody is somewhat up there. Darkside Anakin is probably my favorite hot toy in my collection currently. But this figure, once it comes out, we'll just have to take the cake. This is, I'm just thrilled that Hot Toys did this, and I'm just so excited to see what other figures they decided to do from the line. But yeah, that's going to wrap things up. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Please let me know what figures you want to see next. I'm glad that somebody commented and said they wanted to see a video about Commander Cody and Captain Rex, so that's why I wanted to head and rush this video up to the front. So always happy to hear feedback, and until next time, keep collecting.